Hey, what's going on, guys? So in this video we're going to be comparing Lumen to ray tracing again. Now I've been spending a lot of time in here trying to see which one I like best, Lumen or ray tracing. Now Unreal Engine 5's ray tracing I would say is a little wonky. So what I ended up doing was actually going back to 4.26 and use that ray tracing. And what I'm going to do is compare this ray tracing, which I know is working, to the Lumen tracing in Unreal Engine 5. I'm going to take the same exact scene and copy it in Unreal Engine 5, and then hopefully we can compare the two. So I have the scene already set up here. I have it focused, and I'm going to look at the settings so you can kind of see it. We're not going to go too crazy. So we have ambient occlusion, we have global. We're going to turn on ray tracing GI right here. So you can see if I turn it on and off, we're going to do brute force. We will do 2 bounce and 4 pixels. Actually, let's do 2 and 8. And then what we'll do for the ray tracing reflections, we'll do 2 and we'll do 8 as well. All right. Actually, let's just do 2, 4, 4, 4. Okay. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to save this and I'm going to render it. And then we're going to compare this to Lumen tracing. Okay, so let me make sure we have turn off motion blur for now. And let's see if I can actually render this out right here. And as you can see, I have manual 13. And this is the brightness we're working with. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So it looks pretty good. Looks pretty darn good. Now let me exit out of this just to make sure we don't have anything in the scene here. But it's just a simple scene. I know this thing. Okay, so there's a black. I got a negative fill in there for the previous scene I did, so let's take that out. And just to make sure, I will delete that as well right there. Okay, and we're gonna go back, and as you can see, that black spot is now gone. That's what's the dark spot that was on here earlier. And just to make sure, what I'll do is actually build the reflections just to make sure that it's good to go. Okay, so we're going to go to a movie render queue now, and the name of this is test 1. We're not going to change anything but just the output. And I'm just going to name this RTX on. Okay, for the frame, we're just going to do maybe 48 frames, and we'll do 24 frames per second. And let's see if we can render this. That's okay. I'm getting an error because this is a project I had, but I just took everything out because I wanted to put this Space Marine in there. Right, so it looks like it's rendering. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna notice is even with the same exact lighting that we had from the previous project, it doesn't look the same. Okay, so let's see, just to make sure we have Lumen on. Lumen, Lumen, Lumen. And we'll just do hardware if it's available. And for shadows, we're going to turn on the new one, the virtual shadow map. That's good. So everything is set up in this part. And we have the same exact, we have actually the same exact content as far as sequence goes. It's right here. And we have the same exact shot. Right? Now I'm going to go to post-process, and I'm going to show you the settings here. So we got GI already turned on, as you can see that. And we have reflections to be Lumen as well, as you can see that. So we have Lumen reflections of 4. Now I was doing 10, but after watching one of their screencasts, webcasts, they said that the magic number here is actually 4. But it's funny because you can only go up to 2. But if you put it to 4, you will get pretty much the best quality out of the reflections. I was doing 10, but that's overkill, so just do 4. Right, so we got ray tracing reflections. I have all that off. So this is Lumen right here. Even with the same type of lighting, the direction, you see that it is different. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, as you can see, there's a couple of noises in there. What I have to do is actually increase the bounce from this directional light to copy the same exact lighting as this, because even though it's the same exact lighting, Lumen GI needs a little bit more tweaking. So we can go to the direction of light, which Lumen is using. All right. If I go up, I can crank this intensity up. But as you can see, it's only changing the background. Unless we, yeah, as you can see right there, 40, 60. This is only changing the background. We need more bounce in front of him. So what I actually ended up doing was to get more bounces, I have to turn this up. Which makes sense. Turn the power up on your light and you'll get more bounces. So it works differently than ray tracing a little bit. So if I crank this up to 300, 400, you're really going to start seeing that scene get brighter. Okay? And then we can also turn down the indirect bounce so it is a little bit brighter. And we can match the exposure of this a little bit. Because you can see it's getting close. But the problem with doing that is your reflection right here is also getting blown out. All right, so that's the downside. Now we can turn the whole scene down. All right, so this exposure compensation is 13. Same with the 4.26 scene. But as you can see, we can balance this here to 11 or 10. Okay, so we can't technically compare the two with the same exact settings because Lumen reacts differently. So we have to tweak some settings in here to get it close if we're trying to compare it, right? So I'm going to do the actual face right here with the reflections. Okay. And as you can see right here, we're getting some noise. But I think 11.5 is pretty close to that. And I'm going to save this now. Okay, so let's go back to our directional light. Actually, it's right here. And I mean, if I crank this up to 1,000, maybe 2,000, it's just gonna blow out that reflection. And I purposely used this character because he has that nice dome on his head, reflective surface right here. So as far as, and the indirect lighting right here as well, I can turn it up and down. This is bounces in the background, as you can see. We'll turn that out to 6. So this is pretty much the only way right now, as far as I can do, to compare it to ray tracing as close as I can. And as you can see, the shadow area for the ray tracing still looks a little bit better than this. But this is outdoors, okay? It's indoors, I'm going to try later, and we're probably going to get a different result. So I'm going to go ahead and try to render this out and then see what happens. And we can take a look at it in After Effects again. So let's go to Movie Render Queue. See, that looks much brighter under render now. So if I go here, holy crap, yeah. I'm going to have to turn that down. We're going to have to play around with this a little bit. Because during render, it is much brighter. We can go to the directional light, which I was already in. And let's turn this down to 1. And see what that looks like. Okay, so that's much better. Yeah, it's definitely much better. But let me turn down the light as well. Okay. Make sure we don't have any. No, it's already deleted. Let's make sure. Okay, so this is ray tracing. This is Lumen. Okay, it's pretty. I mean, it's not gonna work 100%. I think I can probably turn up the indirect on this to like 3, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, let's go back. All right, that's much better. So this is 4.26, this is 5. Okay? The reflections, and this is the reflections. And now, the performance and the quality of ray tracing, I think, is still superior. So, Epic Games saying they're gonna get rid of ray tracing eventually in Unreal Engine 5, that kind of worries me a little bit. Because what if you do want to use ray tracing in the future? You know, because if you look in Unreal 5 right now, let me go ahead and save this. If I go to Unreal 5, post-process, you're going to see that ray trace, they're telling you to use Lumen instead, because that message right there, it's the same message I saw with the sequence recorder, and they are going to get rid of the sequence recorder in the future. So as far as I know, they are going to get rid of ray tracing in the future. So for the sake of it, let's compare it now to screen space. That's screen space GI. Turn this off. And for reflection, we'll do screen space as well. Turn this off. And we'll go maximum roughness to 1 and then crank that to 100. So this is your screen space right here. So if you don't have like a high quality computer, you can always use screen space, which depending on your model, it's actually not that bad. When I first started with Unreal, when I had the 1080, I was pretty much screen spacing it all the way. So it's not bad. So I'm gonna render this and see what this looks like. Okay, that's way too bright. So we're gonna have to turn the brightness down. And as you can see, the settings you'll have to change because it works differently, right? The settings are different for each setting, so you can't just use the same setting for everything. That's the only problem you're gonna run into screen space, is your reflections don't really look as good as, you know, Lumen or ray tracing. See, that's Lumen. You can still see the trees. And lastly, what we'll do is actually use, or try to use, the ray tracing in here, in Unreal 5, which like I said, it's pretty wonky donkey. So here's ray tracing. I'm gonna do is turn it up. I think it's 11, or 11.5, I believe. Okay. So that's that. And then we will turn off the screen space because we're gonna be using ray trace. Okay. So if I go to ray trace, none, Lumen, screen space, ray trace. Now what I want to do now is compare this ray tracing to the ray tracing from 4.26. So roughness, I think we did 2 bounds 4. Ooh, 2 bound, ooh, 2, 4. All right, max roughness is 1. Okay, so you can see. And then we will look at ray trace this, GI, brute 4. Right, it's gonna be super bright. So we're gonna have to change the exposure here. Now, some maps, some projects, the ray tracing doesn't actually freaking work. But I know this map works because I have done a lot of ray tracing projects in here. So I went back to this project because I know it works. Now the exposures are gonna be different because like I said, they're all not the same setting, but maybe you can still get something out of this comparison as far as quality goes. Maybe you can still get something out of this comparison as far as quality goes. But to me, I feel like ray tracing still looks better than Lumen. And I don't know if that's because we don't have a lot of options as far as tweaking goes with Lumen yet. Maybe next year when it actually comes out, we would have more control of Lumen. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you is actually change the shadow settings. Okay, now I had to do this last week when I did my first short in Unreal Engine 5. If I go to project settings, I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to turn shadow maps on instead of the new one. And as you can see, the shadows right here looks a lot better. So I'm going to render this out as well. And I'm going to render this out to see what this looks like. So this is with that regular shadow map enabled. Then the last thing we're going to do is for you all out there that have hardware ray tracing, we're going to turn on the shadows hardware ray tracing on. So make sure we have Lumen on. So for you all out there that have RTX cards, if you go to project settings and go to shadow, we're going to turn ray tracing shadows on. So you can see it got brighter, so we're going to have to adjust again. So let's go to the directional light. Let's start there. Maybe cut it in half. Verse 15, which is the original one in the project. All right, 50 looks pretty good. We got our indirect lighting right here, bounce. And I'm just messing with it right now, so you can see in his face it's starting to brighten up. Okay, that looks pretty nice. Like 6. Can we do 12? Yeah. All right, 12 looks good. About 11. Okay, so now when we render this one out, accept, and let's render this out. Sometimes it's a little bit brighter in the render, and yes, it is. So we will go with 10, and I'm gonna go to my post-process and balance it there. Now, if you all know a better method than what I'm doing here, please do let me know, okay? Because I'm really just in here flipping switches, because that's how I learn. Turn this off, and let's render that again. So that hardware tracing actually looks good, but I don't know how many people actually have hardware tracing, okay? So let's look with Lumen first. Lumen SVI is the one that we turned down the brightness for a little bit. This is virtual shadow maps. And then we will turn on ray tracing 4, put that on top. Okay. And then what we'll do is hardware ray tracing with Lumen, put that on top. So that's Lumen with hardware tracing. This is ray tracing from Unreal Engine 4. Okay. And then this one is Lumen virtual shadow maps, no hardware tracing support. Hardware tracing support. And obviously, like I said, the brightness will change because we had to adjust those. All right, so we got ray tracing 5. We also did. So this is ray tracing 5 right now, and UE5, that's going to be going away. Ray tracing 4. Okay. And then what else did we do? Screen space. We also did screen space. So you can see that. That's screen space, and as you can see that, the reflections, that's screen space for you, okay? Gotta be careful with that, it's really hit or miss. But some cases, it should be good enough. All right, so I already dropped that in there. We got the default shadow right here. So this is the default shadow map with no hardware. This is Unreal Engine 4. Okay? Definitely have to tweak some settings around if you want the same exact look like you're used to in Unreal Engine 4 as far as ray tracing goes. But like I said, as far as I know, they are going to get rid of the ray tracing in the future, as far as I know that I've seen and watched. So with that being said, that's why I want to do this, because pretty soon I'm not going to have this option. I'm only going to have this option, screen space, and default. No more RTX. So that's why I'm doing these tests now, so I can figure out what my options are moving forward. All right, so like always, if y'all have any other questions, and I'm sorry that took a long time, but I really just laid out everything for y'all to see, and if I missed something, let me know in the comments below, because you all know I read them. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers. At 50,000 subscribers, we're gonna have a little fun, so help me get there, and I'll see y'all later.